Hello, my name's Ryan from Skimfast Plastering, and today we're going to learn all about how to paint fresh plaster walls. So I'm going to assume that by now you've had your plaster around, he's left a lovely job, nice sharp angles, nice flat walls, and it's looking something like this. So it's all dried out, it's gone from a really dark colour to this light pale colour, which means our plaster is now ready to be painted. And just for contrast, this is what undry and plaster that's not quite ready to be painted looks like. You see the large dark brown areas, those bits are wet. So technically they'd be kind of dry to the touch, but still too wet to paint. So once it's all dried, the nice light pink colour, then we're all ready to paint it. So now's the time to fill any chips, cracks or holes if you've got them. Ours are due to a overzealous electrician retrofitting these sockets, but these sort of things do happen or can happen, so nothing to worry about. Just chuck a bit of filler in there, wait for it to dry and then sand it down. And the final stage of preparation is protection. Now obviously we don't need to protect this floor, but you may need to protect yours and furniture, stuff like that. But I'm just protecting the lights, the sockets and switches with a little bit of masking tape, just to make sure we keep them nice and paint free. So that's it, we're all ready to paint. So let's take a quick look at some of the things that you might need. There's a paint roller, a paint roller tray, some masking tape, a brush, some paint, obviously, a bucket, and a stick to mix the paint. So the first thing we need to do when painting fresh plaster is apply a mist coat. Now a mist coat is just watered down paint. If you were to apply neat paint to plaster without watering it down, the porous nature of the plaster would take some of the moisture out of the paint and it can cause it to peel and all kinds of things. So by applying a mist coat, we take the suction out of the plaster, tame it, and it creates a perfectly primed surface for our second coat to go onto. So now you know what a mist coat is, let's show you how to mix one. Now I like quite a runny mist coat, so I tend to mix it about 1:1 or 2:1 water to paint. This seems to work best for controlling the suction of the plaster. So for the type of paint, we're just using a plain matte emulsion. Do not use vinyl paint or PVA for a mist coat, as it can create a skin on the surface of the wall and ceiling, which is not what we want. So pour that paint into your roller tray and let's start applying the mist coat. So this is quite easy. Obviously painting with a roller is pretty self-explanatory. There will be a high amount of drips created, and that's just due to the level of water in the paint, but you just make sure that you roll over these again and spread them out while they're still wet, just so they don't dry on the wall. Now it's normal for the mist coat to look quite transparent as you apply it. As paint dries, it becomes lighter and more opaque, so it will hide all the transparency that you see now, so try not to worry too much about that. So when it comes to painting the ceiling, bear in mind that you might want to be careful not to get it in your eyes, especially the mist coat with it being a bit more runny than standard paint. If you are concerned about it, you can just chuck on a nice pair of goggles, keep your eyes safe. Make sure you use the brush to do the fine detailed work, like getting around all the sockets, lights, etc. Probably want to use a smaller one than this, but this is what I had to hand, so there you go. So once you've applied your mist coat to all of the dry plaster, you now just want to leave it to dry until it looks something like this. So you see that's the difference that just leaving the mist coat to dry actually makes. It's quite drastic actually. You lose all the streaky marks, the transparency's gone, it's far more opaque, and it just looks a lot cleaner. And this is the point where it's now ready to receive the next coat. So no watering down required on this one, this is just straight paint. The mist coat has already done its job, it's taken the suction out of the plaster, and now we can just apply our paint straight over the top. I'm applying a coat of white everywhere just to really prime it, and then we'll apply a final coat including our colour on top of this. Try to keep your stroke consistent when rolling on, and that'll just make sure that the pattern of the paint is consistent. One thing I always find helpful when painting a wall or ceiling is to start at one end of the room and work my way across. It just helps reduce the odds of missing a patch or a section. You may find as you're painting that you get little problem areas that won't quite cover very well, like you can see here and here. Don't worry too much about those. Chances are when it dries like it did with the mist coat, it will dry a lot lighter than this and will probably cover them. If they're still visible, there's no harm in going back in and giving them an extra little coat. So at this point I'm just giving the ceiling one final quick coat just to make sure it's nice and bright, and then we can move on to the walls. So give the paint a good stir, pour it into the roller tray, And just be extra careful when you're working close to the ceiling not to splash any colour on it. Because we've given the walls more than enough of a prime with that white paint, we only need to apply a single coat of colour. And just be very careful when cutting in. Use a small brush if possible, just to get those lines nice and straight. If you're not confident, you can always apply masking tape to the ceiling just to help draw that line a little bit neater. So that's basically it for the tutorial. I hope this guide's been helpful. Hopefully somebody found this useful and it's helped you with your project. Please remember to do all the liking and subscribing and everything like that. We really do appreciate that. And I'll leave you now with a little clip of how the project looked once it was completed.